Vishanen.
Without objection.
Madam President, I rise this afternoon to say a few words about the immigration reform bill that, as I understand it, we will begin discussing next week. And as the son of an immigrant, somebody who came to this country at the age of 17 without a nickel in his pocket to send his two kids to college, needless to say, I support immigration. Our country is unique in the world. Our country is great because, in fact, we are the sons and daughters of immigrants, and I think we should all be very proud of that. I also want to commend the Judiciary Committee, Senator Leahy and Senator Schumer and Senator Durbin and all of those people who have been working very, very hard what I consider to be a good and strong immigration reform bill. And here are some of the very strong components of that bill that I would hope that every member of the Senate would support, and that is the need for a pathway to citizenship for the 11 million undocumented immigrants in this country, bringing undocumented workers out of the shadows and giving them legal status will make it more difficult for employers to undercut the wages and benefits of all workers, and in my view will be good for the entire economy. I have always and continue to strongly support the DREAM Act, part of the immigration reform bill, to make sure that children of illegal immigrants who are brought into this country by their parents years and years ago are allowed to become citizens. I strongly support a number of the provisions that deal with agriculture. Some years ago, Madam President, I was in Immokalee, Florida, where I suspect you have some of the most exploited workers in America who pick the tomatoes that go to the fast food restaurants throughout this country. And I can tell you that in the state of Vermont, we have dairy farms now that are dependent upon foreign labor, and it's important that we treat those workers with dignity, that we give them legal status. So making sure that we can come to an approach which provides legal status for agricultural workers is extremely important. And I obviously support making sure that our borders are strong and that we stop illegal immigration as best we can. And I applaud the committee for including all of those provisions in the immigration bill that's going to come to the Senate, I expect, next week. But let me, Mr. President, tell you what I worry about very much and have deep concerns about in terms of the current legislation. Let us be clear that while we have made a good step forward in terms of improving our economy as to where it was in the midst of the financial crisis, we still have a long, long way to go. Real unemployment in America is not 7.5%. That's official unemployment. Real unemployment is closer to 14% if you include those people who have given up looking for work in high unemployment areas and people who are working part-time when they want to work full-time. In other words, if you include unemployment among minorities in this country, if you include the unemployment rates among young people in this country, we continue to have a very, very serious unemployment problem in the United States of America. It's an issue that we have got to deal with, and I have a number of ideas on how to deal with it. But one thing we sure as heck do not want to do is make a bad situation worse. So it seems to me that at a moment when our middle class continues to disappear, when millions of workers are working longer hours for lower wages, when median family income has gone down by $5,000 since 1999, it does not make a lot of sense to me that we have an immigration reform bill which includes a massive increase in temporary guest worker programs that will allow large multinational corporations to import hundreds of thousands of temporary blue-collar and white-collar guest workers into this country from overseas. So one of my major concerns here is that I think corporate America is kind of using immigration reform as a means to continue their effort to lower wages in the United States of America, and we must not allow that to happen. Mr. President, we all know that we have a serious crisis in terms of the high cost of college education. It's another issue that we're going to be dealing with soon on the floor. But one thing I can say, and I suspect that I speak for a number of other members in Congress, is that when we needed to get some financial help in order to pay for college, if we didn't come from families that had a lot of money, we worked summertimes. That's what we did. And I find it alarming that within this bill, we are looking at a situation in which we are importing a lot of young people from Europe and elsewhere into jobs that young people in this country need in the summertime and elsewhere to allow them to get going in terms of their careers and allowing them to make a few bucks in order to help them with their college education. I understand that jobs like being a waiter or a waitress or a busboy, and I did some of that when I was a kid, are not glamorous jobs. But you know what? They help you a little bit paying for college. And it's the same with jobs like being a lifeguard or working at a front desk at a hotel or a resort, or being a ski instructor, or being a cook, or being a chef, or working in a kitchen, or being a chambermaid or landscaper. I understand these are not glamorous jobs that pay huge amounts of money. But if you have to figure out how you're going to pay to go to college in the fall, those jobs help. If you need some experience in getting a career off the ground, those jobs help. And I am really concerned that kids in this country are going to be looking for jobs, and employers are going to say, well, actually, we don't have any jobs. That job has been filled by some young person from Eastern Europe. So I want us to take that issue into account. I also find it painful to see the J-1 program, which theoretically is supposed to bring young people into this country to learn about our culture. It's a program to expose young people from around the world to American culture. That is a good thing. I believe in that. I believe young people in America should have the opportunity to go abroad. People from around the world, young people, should have the opportunity to learn about America. Good thing. But I fear very much that this J-1 program is being exploited by corporations like Hershey's and McDonald's, and as an effort to simply bring students from abroad to work at low-paying jobs in the United States. Mr. President, supporters of the temporary H-2B guest worker program claim that there are not enough Americans willing to do these types of jobs. That in essence, what they are really saying is the American people are too lazy. Young people are too lazy to work in these jobs. I don't accept that. I truly do not accept it. And I think it is a slap in the face not only to our young people, but to many, many working people who do not have much education, who want to go out and work and earn some money, to say, no, we're going to have to bring people in from abroad to do those jobs. Jobs like waiters and waitresses and chambermaids and lifeguards, these are not high-tech skilled jobs. These are jobs that our young people can do and need to do. So I have a great concern about the transformation of the J-1 program from being a program dealing with American culture to being one where corporations are exploiting young people from abroad to work in low-paid jobs in the United States. I also find it interesting that instead of raising wages in this country to attract workers, what many of these companies are doing is bringing in people from abroad. You know, what supply and demand is about, and what we learned at Economics 101 in college, is that if an employer cannot find a certain type of worker, the way you entice that worker is you raise wages. But instead of raising wages, what employers are doing is saying, we got huge amounts of cheap labor all over the world. And instead of raising wages for American workers, we're going to bring in cheap labor from around the world. And I think that that is wrong. And I think as we deal with this legislation, it's an issue we have got to address front and center. When we talk about H-2B jobs, what we're talking about are people who work in landscaping. We're talking about amusement park workers. We're talking about housekeepers, waiters, and waitresses. Further, during the summer, businesses are using guest worker programs to hire young people from other countries to be lifeguards. Now, maybe I am mistaken, but I kind of think there are young people in this country who can work as lifeguards and hold other positions in some of the resorts all over this country. And we're talking about ski instructors in Vermont. I can tell you, Mr. President, that in the state of Vermont, we have a whole lot of young people who are very good at skiing, who can teach skiing, and we don't need people from Europe to take those jobs away from young Americans. Mr. President, let me be clear, and I find this to be interesting, if not ironic, and that is that the same corporations and businesses who support a massive expansion in guest worker programs just coincidentally happen to be the same exact corporations who are opposed to raising the minimum wage, the same corporations who support the outsourcing of American jobs, the same corporations that in some cases have reduced wages and benefits for American workers at a time when corporate America is making record-breaking profits. In too many cases, the H-2B program for lower-skilled guest workers and the H-1B program for high-skilled guest workers are being used by employers to drive down the wages and benefits of American workers and to replace American workers with cheap labor from abroad. And here's what it comes down to. It comes down to supply and demand. And if the employers of this country need labor, let them start raising wages for American workers rather than bringing in cheap labor from all over this world. The immigration reform bill that passed the Senate Judiciary Committee could increase the number of low-skilled. Now, we're not talking, I hear speeches here that we're going to have these genius high-tech guys who are going to start companies and create all kinds of jobs. Great. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about an immigration reform bill from the Judiciary Committee that could increase the number of low-skilled guest workers by as much as 800% over the next 5 years and could more than triple the number of temporary white-collar guest workers coming into this country. During the next 5 years, H-1B high-skilled visas could go from 85,000 to as many as 230,000. The number of H-2B low-skilled visas could go from 65,000 to as many as 325,000. And the new W visa program for low-skilled workers could go as high as 200,000. So the first question that members have got to ask ourselves, and the American people have got to ask ourselves, is unemployment throughout America, in Arizona, Oklahoma, Vermont, Michigan, is it so low that right now we desperately need more and more foreign workers to fill jobs that Americans can't fill? Now, the high-tech industry tells us that they need the H-1B program so they can hire the best and the brightest science, technology, engineering, and math workers in the world, and that there aren't enough qualified American workers in these fields. And let me be the first to admit, in some cases, I believe that that is true. I've spoken to employers in Vermont. I suspect it is true all over this country, that there are areas where companies cannot find the skilled workers that they need. They need employees from abroad. And to the degree that's true, let us address that issue. But let us also give you some facts which suggest that that may not be quite as true as some of the employers and corporations are saying. Mr. President, in 2010, 54% of H-1B guest workers were employed in entry-level jobs. So the argument is, hey, we need all of these brilliant guys who are going to start companies, create jobs. 54% in 2010 of the H-1B guest workers were employed in entry-level jobs and performed, and I quote, routine tasks requiring limited judgment, end of quote, according to the Government Accountability Office. In 2010, the official U.S. unemployment rate averaged more than 9.6% per month. Why couldn't these type of jobs be performed by Americans? So again, the point is, I know some of my friends saying, every one of these guys is some genius who's going to start a company. I wish that were the case. Many of these are lower-wage, entry-level jobs that certainly American workers could do. Further, only 6% of H-1B visas were given to workers with highly specialized skills in 2010. That's the issue I keep hearing about, highly specialized skill, but only 6% of H-1B visas went to those folks. More than 80% of H-1B guest workers are paid wages that are less than American workers in comparable positions, according to the Economic Policy Institute. Over 9 million Americans have degrees in a STEM-related field, but only about 3 million have a job in that area. Last year, Mr. President, the top 10 employers of H-1B guest workers were all offshore outsourcing companies. Let me repeat that. One of the great crises that we have faced in the last 30 years is that companies have shut down in America, moved abroad, and got cheap labor abroad. The top 10 employers of H-1B guest workers were all offshore outsourcing companies. These firms are responsible for shipping huge numbers of American information technology jobs to India and other countries. Nearly half of all H-1B visas go to offshore outsourcing firms, while less than 3% of them apply to become permanent residents. Further, half of all recent college graduates majoring in computer and information science in the United States did not receive jobs in the information technology sector. So in other words, we have large numbers of Americans who are graduating with degrees that can handle these jobs, and yet we're bringing in large numbers of people from abroad to do them. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Mr. President, not only would the Senate immigration bill greatly expand the number of H-1B guest workers, it also would provide an unlimited number of green cards to foreign graduates who receive a master's degree or a Ph.D. in a STEM-related field. If we are going to provide green cards to every foreign student with an advanced STEM degree, what purpose does the H-1B program serve other than to suppress the wages of American workers who are already struggling? At the very least, I believe we should prohibit offshore outsourcing firms from hiring temporary guest workers. Mr. President, under the Senate immigration bill, the number of college-educated H-1B guest workers and STEM green card holders who are under 30 years of age will exceed the number of jobs that are available for young information technology graduates. What message does that send to young people in our country who are interested in pursuing careers in information technology? Making matters even worse, I am very concerned that Senator Hatch was able to gut the very modest reforms to the H-1B program designed to prevent companies from replacing American workers with H-1B guest workers. At a minimum, it is essential that those pro-worker reforms be put back into the bill before it is passed by the full Senate. Mr. President, this country was built by immigrants. I'm a son of an immigrant. Many of us are. We are a nation, I believe, that wants to see comprehensive immigration reform passed. I certainly do. And again, I want to congratulate all of those people who have worked on this bill, because there are a lot of very, very important and positive provisions in there. But, Mr. President, I think we have to improve that bill as it leaves committee and as it comes down here to the floor of the Senate. What we want to make certain is that at a time when this country continues to struggle economically, when millions of people are working longer hours for lower wages, when minority unemployment is just extraordinarily high, we do not want to take any action that lowers wages or increases unemployment for American